Good evening and welcome everyone to the Ravenswood City School District Governing Board meeting of June 13th, 2024. I will open the meeting at 6:30 p.m. sharp. I will begin by taking roll call. Trustee Nunes. Here. Trustee Shubomihin.
Here.
Trustee Tavera.
Present.
Vice President Bloom.
Here.
And I myself am present. We have quorum. Next up, we will move to item number 2, which is the approval of the agenda. Before we start, I will start by making some corrections. So we will pull item 7A. We will pull item E. We will make an adjustment for item 11A. It says 2022-2024. The correct sequence is 2024-2027. Next, we will correct another typo with the year listed on agenda item 13B. It says 2022-2023. The correct type should be 2024-2025. And we will table item 16 to the next board meeting. Do we have any other adjustments? As I see none, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda with the aforementioned edits.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries 5-0. We will move to closed session. Before we go into closed session, I will open the floor to any members of the public that wish to address the board on any matters that will be discussed during closed session. As I see none, we will go into closed session at 6:32 p.m. Thank you. Good evening. We will reconvene open session at 7:20 PM. I will report back on matters that happened during closed session. For item 3A, there was discussion, and direction was, nope, there was discussion. Yes. So now we will move on to item number 6, which is from the floor. So if there's any members of the public that wish to address the board on any matters that are not agendized, this is your time.
To the chair, we have two speakers for agenda item number 6. The first speaker is Keisha Knowles.
Through the chair. Before our speaker comes up, I just want to let you know that we actually have two family members from Ravenswood City School District who have children that attend our schools. And they were also part of the Parent Leadership Academy. And they participated in the school canvas that took place in April, where we partnered with families to be able to see what is actually happening inside the classroom and to be able to use our learner profile to gauge what our strengths are and our areas of opportunity lie. So I appreciate them coming.
Thank you. And just a note for our speakers, as you come up, you have 2 minutes on the mic. Board members usually refrain from answering direct questions during the time, but each board member is tasked with processing whatever's being discussed and eventually coming forward with additional information at a later time. But yes.
Good evening to our board members, fellow room. Hello, my name is Keisha Knowles. I'm a parent of a student at Cesar Chavez. I attended Ravenswood City School District, also myself. I am a parent leader working alongside other parents and supported by Innovative Public Schools. I belong to Macedonia Church in Menlo Park. I am an active member of my community. I am also a team mom for the basketball organization called Black Top Ballers. I attended the school canvas tour. I really liked the idea that we could see the schools from the inside. Schools have been remodeled, so it was nice to see the new innovations of the schools. And see how the classes are being taught, some of the different subjects that are being taught at our schools. We visited some of the club classes there at Cesar Chavez. That's where my son went to school also. So it was nice to see some of the different clubs that have been put in place of just academic classes. Although we've seen 4 classes, and out of the 3 classes that we've seen, there were club classes. I would have liked to see more academic classes being ran than the club classes being taught. I also would have liked to interact more with the teachers to see what they would like to see as being changed to make their life easier as a teacher. I would have also liked to talk to the principal more to see where his or her head is and different changes that they would like to also see in the upcoming years.
Thank you. So that's just our 2-minute mark. So if you'd like to
Thank you.
finish off with like a last minute sentence. Alrighty, thank you. Mr. Clerk, our next speaker.
To the chair, next speaker is Brenda Lisette Nava Sandoval.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Brenda Lisette Nava Sandoval. I'm a mom of 2. I have a son at Bellhaven and a daughter at Cesar Chavez. My experience in our visits to our schools were great. I had nothing to say but thank you, and I appreciate everything that you guys do for our kids. I would love to have more time in the classrooms, and for next time to visit my school, Bellhaven. I have lots of love for the school. My brothers and sisters attend to the school, and now my son and my daughter did too. So thank you very much to everyone. And it was great. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers from the floor?
Through the chair, we do not.
Thank you. We will move on to item number 7, which is the consent agenda. There was number 7A, which we pulled, which is the consideration to approve the May 23rd, 2024 regular board meeting minutes. Trustee Tavera was not present. So I will entertain do we have any questions or comments regarding item 7A? As I see none, I will entertain a motion for item 7A.
I'll make a motion to pass item number 7A.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. All opposed? Abstain?
Aye.
The motion carries 4-0-1. We will move on to item number 7E, which is the consideration to approve an agreement with Leland Stanford Junior University for the Stanford Teacher Education Program. Trustee Shabomahin cannot vote on this item. So do we have any questions or comments regarding 7E? As I see none, I will entertain a motion for item 7E.
I'll make a motion to pass item number 7E.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Abstain. Motion carries 4-0 with trustee Shabomahin absent for the vote. I will go back to the top of the consent agenda with, I will entertain a motion to approve item 7, which is the consent agenda, minus item 7A and 7E.
Through the chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve item 7.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I will second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 5-0. We'll move on now to item number 8, which is the presentation of the parcel tax survey results and draft resolution. I will make a note. This is a recent information that just happened during closed session, but as my employer is one of the largest landowners of the city, it will directly impact my ability to sit in this presentation, so I will recuse myself from item 8 until I have clarity from County Council. So I will hand over to Vice President Bloom.
Thank you. Dr. Eaker, I hand it off to you.
Good evening. Just good evening. I'm pleased to present our partners from FM3 who conducted a survey of Ravenswood residents. It's a large survey. FM3 has been very involved with the district for some time now and has done our last bond survey, our last parcel tax survey, our previous bonds, and they've been remarkably accurate during that time. So they've been a really good partner in helping us understand where the community is on a number of issues, including on the possibility of renewing our parcel tax, which, as you'll remember, expires in 2026. So not soon, but soon enough that it's time, the board believes it's time to start exploring that option. So the board authorized FM3 to conduct this survey, and tonight we're pleased to present the results of that survey. So without further ado, I'll present Kurt from FM3.
All right, thank you very much. Kurt Balo from FM3 Research. Happy to be here to present these results. And no pressure. Apparently, we've been very accurate in all the prior surveys, so hopefully track record continues. This is a survey conducted last fall, so I'm just going to go over quickly some of the methodology behind it and then get to the results itself. So we did a little over 300 interviews with those who are likely to vote in this coming November election. So it's not all residents, not all adults, not even all voters, but those likely to vote in the presidential election which happens to be almost all voters. Turnout for those is pretty high now, particularly with the all mail ballots. We did our standard approach now, which is a dual mode survey. And the two modes are phone interviews and online interviews. And we did a mix of English and Spanish interviews as well. I mean, there's a lot of rich tracking data here. And because this is a school district, I always have to point out that sometimes percentages will not add up to 100% because of rounding. This is the 1 + 1 can sometimes equal 3 if it's 1.4 plus 1.4 rounds up to 3. Pollster humor there. All right. So the beginning section here is just this sort of the context. Where are voters' heads? You're going to ask them potentially to vote on another parcel tax measure. So what's the lens through which they're going to consider this? And we have some job rating questions here. So the first one here, first slide here has the scale of excellent, pretty good, only fair, or poor. So kind of 2 flavors of positive, the blue bars, and 2 flavors of negative, the orange bars, and gray bars are, I don't really know, or I've never heard of this entity here. And you'll see that there's some interesting positive trends here for a couple of these slides. So the first one here is the ratings of local classroom teachers. They've been kind of oscillating going back to 2016 from 40 to 33 to 44. And in this survey here, so a couple of years after the prior one, bumped up to 62%. So a pretty solid majority feel like classroom teachers are doing an excellent or pretty good job. We also added a couple other categories given the specific focus of this measure, which is early childhood educators and childcare providers. A few ticks below, but that's mostly because of a greater don't know amongst those categories. We also asked broadly about your local public schools and the district itself. So local public schools, that is the high water mark there at 49% with an excellent or good mark there. The fair and the poor number was actually at 29% back in 2018, and that is down to 12%. So it's been definitely a shift in opinions about the local public schools here in the district, as well as the district itself, which the opinions are also at a high water mark at 47%, who hold an excellent or pretty good impression of the district. This is a real key question. It's our conceptual question about funding need. If we're going to ask voters to support a revenue measure, part of the equation is, do they feel like there's an appreciable need for funding? And the scale we use is there a great need, some need, a little need, or no real need. We focus on the great and some need because that tends to correlate most strongly to support for a local revenue measure. And you'll see here that 72% feel like there is great or some need, which is a nice big number, and most importantly, above the 2/3 vote threshold for a parcel tax. So it's in the same range in aggregate as we've seen in prior surveys. There is a one note of caution here. It's just that the intensity of that feeling has declined some, from 58 to 54 down to 45. So broadly speaking, more than 2/3 of voters feel like you as a district need additional funding, but the intensity with which they hold that opinion has lessened. And let's get to a little more specifically. So this question here, I'm going to go back a slide here. This is really generic. It just says a need for additional funding. It doesn't say specifically what how funds will be spent, how it'll be raised. It's more of the gut feeling type of reaction. On this slide, we asked a little more narrow version of this, which is talking about basically, TK, and thinking about, do you think that there's additional need for funding for that? And it's basically at the same level there at 72%. We did ask in the survey some agree, disagree statements. And so the blue bars are shades of agreement and the orange bars are shades of disagreement, gray being, I don't know. And you'll see here in the sort of bolded italic language there, Ravenswood school district officials spend taxpayer money effectively and efficiently. There were more mixed opinions of that, frankly, in the past. And this is now by a 20-point margin, there's agreement there that the district is conducting itself as an effective financial steward. So again, several data points on the positive: impressions of the school district, impressions of teachers, impressions of schools, impressions of their financial management, all improved. Impressions of need, intensity down a little bit, but still in aggregate pretty high. And a couple more of these agree, disagree statements here that are a little more specific again towards early childhood education. And you'll see that there is incredibly broad and unified agreement amongst voters in your district here that how important it is. And we kind of framed it a few different ways about educational outcomes and readiness for kindergarten, and also closing the achievement gap. And in both cases, wide majorities of voters felt like early childhood education is important to achieve those goals. So that's the backdrop. Let's get to a measure. Here is a hypothetical 75 words that could appear on the ballot. This is a extension and increase of the existing parcel tax that's expiring in a couple of years now. Essentially a doubling of it to $434 for another 8 years, and which would generate $2.7 million annually, have an inflation adjustment in it, and some of the exemptions here. And support is at 72%. So as we look at these things, if you just put the slide in front of me, I'd say, well, does the aggregate yes vote exceed vote threshold? Check one. Is there more intensity on the yes side? And for a 2/3 measure, we kind of want to get that definitely yes to 40% or higher. Just kind of get to that threshold here at 40%, which is good. Much more intensity on the yes side. The only two bits of just a little caution here is some of the indecision, but otherwise this is a pretty strong support. It's just 13% undecided is a little high for a parcel tax. Parcel taxes are not complicated finance mechanisms, so usually we see single digit undecided votes there. So those are potentially voters who could break one way or another. And then that leaning yes. So we at FM3 ask, get 3 flavors of yes and 3 flavors of no. We ask the question, would you vote yes or no? And then we push those people definitely or probably yes. And then if someone's initial reaction is to be undecided, we push them a little bit and ask them if they're leaning one way or another. And so to get to 2/3, we're relying upon that 7% who's thought that their initial reaction was to be undecided, but push came to shove, they'd probably vote yes. And so if something were to change in the overall economic environment, political environment, that's probably the ones that are the most tentative in their support. But overall, we're still at that. And these are all really getting to 2/3 is hard, as you know, and these are pretty positive numbers in this environment. I've given many a presentation in the last couple of months where no one's really getting to these 70 numbers for tax measures. We did have some follow-up questions. Hey, that sounds like maybe that's a big number. What if we went down and asked about smaller amounts? And there really wasn't much of a change in aggregate, 72, 73 to 75, that's kind of margin of error difference. The intensity goes up. I'll go back a slide from 40% definitely yes to 50, 53. So lowering the amount feels like it might make voters a little more confident in their positions, but may not have a huge difference in terms of their accurate level of support amongst voters at large. The next several slides go through a variety of ways that funds from the tax measure could be spent and invested in your community. And some of these are really specific and some of them are more sort of categorical benefits of the funds. And the scale that we use is this extremely important, very somewhat or not too important. We tend to focus on the more intense reactions, those who feel like a particular spending category is either extremely or very important. We've summarized those on the right-hand side and sorted by it. These are astronomically high numbers here. We don't see pushing 90% of voters feel like anything's extremely or very important these days. And so there's just a lot of things, a lot of ways in which funds from this measure could be spent that resonates particularly strongly with voters. Wages for educators, or retaining and attracting teachers, things on that side, specifically talking about childcare, reading programs, and some of the early childhood things here, which are somewhat different from your past measures. As you go through this list, you'll see that orange bar on the right-hand side. That's the percentage of voters who feel like it's not too important. It's basically non-existent. Everything that you might do with funds from this measure is seen as important. Now, the intensity starts to vary a little bit. So, for example, providing competitive 21st century learning in each school 86% think that's very important, and 39% think that's very extremely important. But right below that, 57% think it's extremely important that all early education facilities meet quality and safety standards. So there are some distinctions here which I think can be important for communications going forward. We did sort of include a few things that aren't specifically things you invest the dollars in, but how the funds would be spent. So when we get down to exemptions for seniors and annual financial audits, and keeping funds local, those things resonate really strongly broadly across your electorate. A little less intensity than some of the other, specific benefits to children, but those are clearly important to your voters as well. The last section here is we do a little bit of pro and con testing. This is not meant to be a perfect simulation of an electoral environment, but where's the ceiling, where's the floor? If we presented a bunch of rationales to support a measure, what does that do to support? A bunch of rationales to vote no, which tend to be more visceral. And what does that do? And this has a very kind of common Gesundheit dynamic that we see here, which is support for measures starting at one level, going up a little bit and coming roughly back down to the initial starting point. You do see that some of those undecideds over the course of the survey do break in the other direction, right? We went from the middle teens up to in the low 20s in terms of a no vote here. So it suggests that your starting point for a measure is really high and probably pretty close to the ceiling of support for a measure at this point in time, or at least when the survey was taken. So you don't have a huge margin there to lose voters or to stay above that 67%. But the course of the survey, you did stay above it. These were some of the arguments in favor of a measure, the hypothetical ones we talked about. We talked about the benefits for brain development with early childhood education here, about how the TK education helps students be prepared for kindergarten. Talked about how being able to increase support for these early childhood education programs is really helpful for middle and low income families. The fact that you have the ability to access matching funds. And I know that this survey was conducted a little bit ago, but that concept is resonating even more strongly now. Everywhere I'm seeing right now is tapping into matching funds for any type of project is particularly compelling. On all these things is there's a lot of text here, so I'm not going to go through all of these text here. I'm just going to kind of skip to the punchline. The scale we used when we presented these to the respondents is this a convincing reason to support a measure? Either very or somewhat convincing. And they could have said it's not too convincing or they don't believe it. We took those off the slide because everything here is in the 80% very or somewhat convincing. This is really remarkable because, again, one of our rules of thumb is if an argument is seen as very convincing by 40% or more, that's compelling. Every single one of these was seen as very convincing by 40% or more. So these are things that were crafted well. Your input, your intuition about what would resonate with your voters here was all very accurate, and you're getting into the 50s. So these are a lot of compelling rationales for a measure here. And you'll see that some of those top ones getting into the 50s, very convincing, are very, very compelling arguments. We did talk about what about a bigger measure, which was basically guaranteeing all eligible kids could take advantage of this in the boundary here up, and it would cost a $900 per year parcel. 55% yes. The fact that you had a majority who were really willing to support a $900 parcel tax is kind of remarkable. It's obviously not anywhere near 2/3 per se, but it was really, I think, a particularly, a positive response. We did say, well, what about the other? What if we just do the renewal? In case this thing came back and increasing it was not in the cards, what if it was just a straight renewal? But we were clear that this would say it kind of keeps what you're doing, but wouldn't allow for the expansion of early childhood education programs here. And that support dipped down a little bit to the mid 60s, a little bit below 2/3. So I think that and we saw when we lower the dollar amount in isolation, that didn't necessarily change support dramatically. So it suggests that maybe the dollar amount isn't as important as the values and benefits. So with that, I hit on a number of these items here, but generally speaking, the district is viewed more favorably. The perceived need is maybe a tad lower, but all the other metrics are holding steady from your positive results from more recent surveys, or even better. Looking at the parcel tax of extension that increases that, essentially doubling it to $434. It looks like it's something that is viable for this November. Obviously, there were, I want to point out that there's still those little, requires some leaning yes to get there. And the intensity of the need for funding is down a little bit. So it's going to require an active community effort to push this across the finish line. But it seems like it's something that is, when we took the survey, a viable alternative for you to consider. So I think that gets me to the end. How do you want to handle questions or?
Thank you so much. Now's the time for questions and comments. Do we have any questions or comments from the board? I have one question.
Sure.
I know we did this survey in September, and I'm sure you guys have done a lot of surveys since September, maybe. But do you foresee that these high numbers would kind of stay around even during this season for November, even though the survey was done in September?
Yeah, I would be, I would say I have seen many, oftentimes some of our clients do like a baseline survey the prior year, and then a tracking survey in the spring or summer. And I have seen mixed results with those tracking surveys. In some communities, they've held steady, in some they have not. It depends on a variety of other circumstances, what the mechanism is, and all those types of matters. So I have not seen any get appreciably better. And this is a tougher economic environment, and the news I think wasn't fantastic in the fall, but it hasn't gotten appreciably better, broadly speaking, now. So would this hold? I can't 100% say. I will say that all these numbers in here are remarkably strong. And much stronger than I see in other types of surveys that we've conducted, whether last year or certainly currently, and given your past history at the ballot, suggests that they probably are more resilient than in other communities. That'd be my general impression.
Thank you. Any other questions? And any questions from the public? I see none. Thank you very much for the presentation, and then we will move on to item number 8B, which is the presentation of a resolution placing the parcel tax on the November 2024 amount.
Thank you, all. And I'll be relatively brief here. The language that was tested in the poll was crafted with a bunch of people. Joy Shen has been leading this work. She couldn't be here tonight, but she's brought together a bunch of folks to kind of workshop this, work through this language. And so we've prepared, per board's direction at the last meeting, a draft resolution that includes the language tested in the poll, as well as the, let's call it legalese, surrounding that resolution text, directing staff to do the necessary things to place this on the November ballot. The board is not voting tonight on the resolution. The board is providing, hopefully, feedback if there is any. The plan would then be to bring this resolution back to the board at the June 27th meeting. With that, I'll conclude my presentation.
Thank you. Any questions or comments regarding this item, the presentation of the resolution? Okay, as I see none, thank you very much. And we can call President Monty back in. And then I will also just note for the record that Trustee Nunez had to leave at 7:31. So I just want that to be on the record. Thank you very much. I guess we'll take a 1 minute break while President Monty comes back, and then we'll move on to item 9 when she is back. Our minute is quick and finished, so we're back. 7:30.
We'll move on to item number 9, which is the consideration to approve the San Mateo County Board of Education candidate policy form and resolution number 24-27, calling for an election to be held on November 5th, 2024, for the election of 2 members of the governing board. Do we have any questions or comments regarding item number 9? As I see none, I will entertain a motion for item number 9.
I'll make a motion to approve item number 9.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Motion carries.
You're the chair.
Oh, you're right, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Resolution number SY 24-27, a resolution of the Ravenswood City School District calling for an election to be held on November 5th, 2024 for the election of 2 members of the governing board.
all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all opposed say nay. Motion carries 4-0. We'll move on to item number 10, which is end of year vital signs presentation.
Good evening. Good evening, President Latu, trustees, and Superintendent Sudaria. Very excited to be here tonight to present on our end of year vital signs. There it is. All right. I'm going to start actually with our superintendent.
So trustees, each year, we do present to the board how we are progressing towards improving our academic outcomes and outcomes in general for our students. I also want to preface as we move forward that this work is to ensure that we're tracking progress as we strive to reach our learner profile. And again, the learner profile is our community-led vision to ensure that what we want to be true for kids is actualized. And we are here every day trying to ensure that we improve the educational experience of our kiddos as they deserve the best education. So here's the agenda as we tackle the information tonight with our team and our executive summary. First, I want to introduce our team who will be presenting and just emphasizing that this work is a collective effort. So the instructional leaders responsible for this on the ground work is the principal team, and they are here tonight to engage with the board as well. We have Michelle Masuda, who's here for Bellhaven, Alex Cazada from Los Robles McNair, and yes, Elizabeth Carriage for Custano School of the Arts. And our middle school team, our principal is out sick, so we are represented by the teaching and learning team. And then we also have our leadership team who's accountable for this work as well. And our Sarah Stone, our assistant superintendent, be co-presenting along with Karen Schreiner and our assistant director of teaching and learning, and Austin Batson, our coordinator of data and assessment. And you can see here that over the last 2 years, we've really been focusing on continuing our improvement, monitoring outcomes, social and emotional health, and just really understanding what causes these outcomes and how we can improve our instruction. This is our end of year data that shows the actions that we've taken. And I really want you to be able to, our goal is for you to really see the specificity that we want to put in place.
Okay.
We'll hand it off.
Thank you. All right. So Superintendent Sudaria mentioned this, but we've really spent the last 2 years building infrastructure. This graphic comes from an article that we're actually reading in connection to our Ravenswood Promise Action Committee work. And what it really highlights is just how important it is to build that strong foundation so that you can get to the student's success. And so the last 2 years, we've been building out the systems around collecting data, progress monitoring, building out the capacity of our teachers to understand high quality science of reading, literacy strategies, and start to use those in the classroom. Bless you. Bless you. As we've mentioned in the previous 2 vital signs presentations, our focus areas this year were connected to building high quality teams at our school sites and across our district, having time not only for those teams to meet, but also in making sure that we're using our times really effectively to get into classrooms, to provide feedback to teachers, and also the use of time with our students. We built out the universal tier 2 time where students are receiving the extra support that they may need, specifically in literacy this year. And then that goes to our tiers. Not only did we build out that tier 2 time, but we also implemented a new core curriculum in ELA and English language arts in our K-5 program, which we rolled out quickly and with a lot of fidelity. And I have to say, although I did not list it here as one of our celebrations, I actually do want to highlight that, because rolling out a new curriculum in a year and seeing it in action the way we've have is actually quite an accomplishment. But I do want to highlight here just some of the big things that you'll see in the data tonight that we really should celebrate. And some of these things might be in the appendix, and some of these things will be in the presentation. But we have seen overall improved reading and math growth for our students based in our different data monitoring tools. Specifically at the mid-year, something that was really exciting and something I want to highlight again is that our Black and African American students exceeded ELA growth at the mid-year, which is a huge accomplishment. We have seen reduced chronic absenteeism this year in specific groups of students, and we have seen a reduced overall suspension. Those are some great accomplishments, and in the spirit of continuous improvement, we have more to do, and you'll see that in our data tonight. I'm not going to go through every single bullet point here, but I do want to just highlight that in order to get some of that success and in order to do what we're doing, we did actually put a lot of energy and effort into the building of teams. And I mentioned a few of those things before. A highlight here that I just want to note is that we have established instructional leadership teams at every school site. And actually over the last 2 days, we had our all ILT retreat where we spent time not only building up trust, which is you'll see is one of our goals for next year in those teams, but digging deeply into the data of our students and really making intentional plans, putting together the goals and the actions so that we can see the outcomes that we're asking and that we strive for our students. Time, again, I've highlighted. One of the things I want to just name that I think also is just a huge accomplishment is that universal tier 2 time, and that every single school has some semblance of tier 2 happening, but we have tier 2 time using a common curriculum. We've trained, how many people would you say we've trained this year? 175 people, which includes not only our teachers, but our partners who come into schools to use that curriculum. And you will see that we are seeing impact of that. And also, as our parents mentioned earlier tonight, the inaugural canvassing of the schools where families were able to come into classrooms and see work together with a team of educators to look at the instructional core and actually see for themselves things that they liked and tell us things that they wanted to improve, which is also some new data that we'll be reporting on in the future. And again, our tiers, and I've already mentioned some of the success around this. One thing again to highlight is that We are really thinking about improving outcomes for targeted groups of students, and that I presented a few months ago at around our Changemaker program, and we're going to mention that throughout this presentation tonight as well. Ooh, that's hard to see. Okay, so the next few slides are going to be more detailed and we'll give you more information about this, but really we wanted to start with, we had some goals and this is where we got at the end of the year. So as I've mentioned before, there are things to celebrate, and specifically on this slide, you'll notice that we met our goal in reducing chronic absenteeism, which is no small feat. It's been a very, very huge challenge for school districts across the country since COVID to bring those attendance numbers back up. And we actually met our goal this year. So that's something to celebrate. And suspensions are down from the past. Still work to do. When we look at our academic data, we're moving in the right direction, but we have work to do. And we just want to make sure that we're very transparent and clear. We have systems in place now. We put that foundation in place. And there's still work to do. And unfortunately, we don't have our LPAC or our CASP results yet. Those we'll be able to report out on in the fall. I am going to pass it over to my colleague, Austin Batson.
Good evening, trustees. My name is Austin Batson. I'm the Data and Assessment Coordinator for the district. I'm going to walk us through some of the iReady data we have for the end of the year. This first slide is looking at iReady Reading, which we administered, or students in 2nd to 8th grade took 3 times this year, beginning, middle, and end of the year. And this slide shows kind of an individual look at our students' growth data. It's important to have that high-level picture. How are our students growing overall? But it's also really important that we understand growth as such an individual measure of student learning and student growth and student achievement. And so this slide kind of attempts to balance both of those out. On the chart on the right is what I call the quadrants, 4 quadrants. Students in the top right are our students who are showing high growth, so who met the growth expectation, met or exceeded the growth expectation for the year, and who are also classified here as high performance, so students who are performing well. And those students at end of the year were 10% of our 2nd to 8th grade students, or around 97 students. The quadrant on the top left are our students who are not yet showing high performance, but have had high growth. So these are students who met or exceeded their growth goals for the year. And that is 43% of our students, or 407 students. I also just want to call out that on this particular graphic, our growth goal is set at 80% instead of 100%. And that's because we administered this diagnostic a little bit earlier, around 80% of the way through the school year. So that's why you're seeing this growth goal at 80% right here. The other 2 quadrants, our lower left and our lower right, are our students who did not show high growth this year. And so some students got really close to that growth goal. Some students still did not show much growth right now. And those are things that we need to look into individually at the site level, at the teacher level. Overall, over half of our students achieved high growth in reading throughout the year, which is not all the way there yet. We want all of our students to be at that high level of growth, but that is more growth than we saw last year for the end of the year. So we are moving in the right direction. We're not there yet, but lots to celebrate there. When we look at math, we see something very similar. We see around 54% of our students achieved that high level growth in math, which is what we were looking for. And we're looking to get all students there. Still not there yet, but improvement over last year. And I'd say we are going in the right direction, which is very exciting. The last portion of iReady data is shifting from that growth perspective to that performance, that benchmark perspective. And so they're both important to look at. They need to see both. We certainly want to celebrate and highlight growth, and we also want to celebrate and highlight changes in proficiency in benchmark placement levels throughout the year. So on the left-hand side, we see the beginning, middle, and end of year percentages for reading. The dark red, I know the scale is a little hard to read. So the dark red is students who were placed 3 or more years below grade level. The orange, students who are placed 2 years below grade level, yellow 1, green is early on, and then blue is at or above grade level. And the really exciting part, the really exciting movement that we're seeing here is that our students who are furthest behind, the students who are 3 or more grade levels below, those numbers are shrinking significantly throughout the year. Again, we are not where we need to be yet, but this is really exciting to see, and this shows growth and shows learning. For reading, 45% of our students grew at least one placement level throughout the year. And for math, 57% of students grew at least one placement level throughout the year. And with that, I'm going to pass it to my colleague, Karen Schreiner.
Good evening. My name is Karen Schreiner. I'm the Assistant Director of Teaching and Learning for Ravenswood. And I'm going to share with everyone a little bit about our foundational skills literacy data. And we're going to start with looking at kindergarten and first grade. And this is through our new assessment this year, DIBBLS, which stands for Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills. So this data shows our kindergarten and first grade students' proficiency. We can see, we probably remember from the middle of the year that we had a bit of an uptick in our students who were well below. And we saw that number drop down after putting some action plans in place at the middle of the year. And so overall, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, our students increased in proficiency 9 percentage points. Similar to what Austin shared, not at all where we want to be yet. Good baseline data for the first year of implementation in order to inform our plans for next year. This next slide, or the next 2 slides, speak to the implementation of Universal Tier 2 Time, or UT2T, through our curriculum SIPs, Systematic Instruction in Phonics, Phonological Awareness, and Sight Words. And so what this data is telling us is that the red bars represent the percentage of mastery tests that were passed at the middle of the year. This data we reported on our last vital signs presentation. The green bar represents the percentage of mastery tests passed at the end of the year. And so at the end of the year, overall, students took, I believe it was 2,600 and something mastery tests. And the overall mastery test pass rate was 79%, which increased from 71% at the middle of the year. And there's especially a highlight here for our first grade teams at schools where at the middle of the year, students were passing about 1/3 of their mastery tests, and through the support of more professional learning, through collaboration with our intervention teams, that greatly increased by the end of the year to 75%. So this slide here tells us not just about whether kids are mastering the content being taught, which is really important, that has to happen in order for students to learn to read. This slide tells us how much students are growing in terms of years of literacy growth in those foundational skills. And so the blue bar represents really accelerated growth, 1.5 years worth of growth over the course of a year. The green represents they're on track. They've made 1 year of growth. Yellow represents they grew, but not a full year. So somewhere between maybe 1/4 of a year to 75% of a year. And the red represents no or very minimal growth. So across all of our grades, on average, a little bit more than half of students made 1 year worth of growth. And there's some highlights here for us to lift up. Our third grade students and teams across schools, where 71% of third grade students made 1 year or more of growth. And for our second grade team, very few students made no growth. And with that, I think I'll pass it back off to Sarah Stone.
All right, so moving on to our student culture data, our student belonging data. We did, as I said before, we did decrease suspensions overall. And while we have done that, we can see from this chart that we do need to do better. And specifically, we need to do better for our students who identify as Pacific Island or Black African American. I do want to highlight that we saw a pretty significant decline in suspensions for students with disabilities. And we want to do a little bit more unpacking. And in fact, in the all ILT retreat today, I know that the middle school was looking very closely at this chart in particular and starting to really do some deep questioning about why are they getting the results that they're getting? What does this mean? The other thing I want to highlight about this slide is that we know every single student on this slide. Every single student who is represented here has a support plan through the coordination of services teams. We have information about what we want to do to support them. And I want to say that it's important that we do this before it gets to this. And so I want to just go back to the plan around our Changemaker program, which is a tier 1 program where the goals are to create a sense of belonging and pride and affinity for our students, to create leadership pathway for our Black and Brown students, and to shift the internal and external narrative about our students. And so when we can do that and we do it well, we will see this decrease. So I just want to sit there around this for a minute because I know that this is sobering and it's not what we want to see. On a more positive note, it's great that our students are starting to come to school again more regularly. As I said before, COVID really shifted that for schools and for students. And we have seen an increase this year and we met our goal. We're going to continue to move in this direction. We have put some things in place, I think, that have helped get us to where we're going with this, and we can continue to capitalize on those assets and continue to grow. So next year, based on the data, based on not just our academic data, but based on anecdotal data, street data, map data, satellite data, and information that we gathered over the last year through the all ILT meetings and other engagements with our staff and our families, we know that we need to continue on the road that we've been on. We don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We want to continue to move forward. We want to continue to build those teams, but we're adding to it that we need to have really trusting teams that are using data regularly to plan and to inform their practice. We know that, yes, we made time for people to get into classrooms and they're observing, and we had some pretty, I think, significant success this year in people following the talent initiative. And I don't know what we still don't, I don't think, have the final rates, but how many people were able to get that final feedback and all of that. We're, close to 100%. And we want to make sure that we're focusing in on providing actionable feedback regularly to our staff so that they can improve and that we're looping back and doing some progress monitoring around that. And we're going to continue on the road to building literacy. We know that we want all of our students reading by 3rd grade. That is actually a civil right. And in order to do that, we need to build the capacity of our teachers around building early literacy skills and practices in the classroom. And then across the board, across content, across grade levels, we're going to be focusing deeply on language development. I do want to highlight that when we talk about literacy, we're also talking about writing. We're talking about reading and writing because it is a reciprocal process. And so when kids are doing well with reading, we are also building up their skills as writers. So when we think about the things that we want to do next year, we have a theory of action. We know that if we do some things and we do them really well and we go deep into them, we're going to see impact. So a couple things I want to highlight here. One of the teams that we're going to be focusing on developing and ensuring or using data to inform practice are professional learning communities or collaboration teams at school sites. We are also going to continue to focus on those restorative practices for students so we can shift that disproportionality in disciplinary actions. And as I noted, we are going to be focusing in on language. And so we're going to be building out a vision and a roadmap for our multilingual learners. And we believe that if we do these things well, we will see these results. In terms of actionable feedback, we want to make sure that site leaders are prioritizing instruction, that they're in classrooms weekly, if not daily. And again, giving bite-sized, actionable feedback to teachers that teachers can use to then focus, reflect, and then focus on their practice and improve. And I'm actually going to pass this slide over to Austin and Karen.
So for our goals in terms of iReady, we are making a change in how the goal that we are stating as our kind of our high level goal for next year. This year, our goal was to say that 100% of students will meet their median typical growth goal. And that is still our goal. That is the goal that we want. That is the goal that our students deserve. However, that goal is not how our site leaders and our ILTs look at it kind of in the moment. That is more of a 30,000-foot goal. And the goal that is a little bit more immediately actionable and that our teachers and our teams engage with is looking at this median typical goal. And so we're kind of shifting from one view to another. We're not eliminating that. We're just trying to change how we look at it so it's a little bit more immediately actionable. And so that goal will be for our median typical growth goal to be 120%, which is about 1.2 years worth of growth. This is a goal that will help accelerate our students' learning. We believe it's an achievable goal, and it's something that our staff and our team members can very actively engage with.
In terms of our lower grade literacy goal for Dibbles and Lectora, we're increasing our goal from 55% to 60%, partially because that is due to the growth that we saw this year, and also because early literacy, especially in TKK, will be a huge focus next year for coaching and for support for those students and teachers. Our SIPS mastery test goal remains the same, 90% of students making at least a year's worth of growth. This year, we were a little bit more than 50%. 90% is a big jump, but this year was also our first year of implementation. So we want to keep that goal really ambitious with our accelerated curriculum. Austin, do you want to speak to LPAC?
In terms of our reclassification goal, this is a little bit one of the more kind of technical in the weeds goal, but it's a really important one. And that would be that we want to increase the percentage of our multilingual learners who are making progress on the LPAC by 10 percentage points. This past year, in 2022 to 2023, 45% roughly of our students made progress on the LPAC in terms of moving up what the state determines as an LP level. This year, our goal is to increase that by 10 percentage points to 55%, which is classified by the CDE as significant improvement. Similarly, for CASP, we want students to move an average of 15 points closer to standard in ELA and in math, which is also classified as a significant improvement by the CDE.
So one of the promises that we made to ourselves is that we will always begin and end every presentation with our Ravenswood promise. And again, our focus on our students. And this is our North Star. This is where we're headed. As Superintendent Sudaria said at the beginning, we need to do everything that we can because they deserve what we have up here that our community has asked us to create for our students. And so with that, I want to thank you and available for questions.
Do we have any questions or comments from the board?
I can start with some of trustee Nunez's questions that she had emailed. I know you addressed some of them, but I just want to make sure that we act. I told her I would do.
Right.
So one of the questions she had asked is around suspensions and restorative practices. So, you know, who is helping with restorative practices? Are all staff, well, are all staff versed in this? And then we know you talked about the Changemakers program. And so one of the questions she asked around that too was, it's a good tier 1 prevention, but what are we doing for students who were suspended when they come back into the classroom? How are we working with them to repair harm that they caused or may have been caused to them? So those are some of her questions around the belonging.
Yeah. So I appreciate that question. I'll start with the second part of the question first, and that is that when students come back from a suspension, there is a re-engagement process, which can be found in the appendix, and I can probably scroll through it and find it. No, I can't. It won't let me. What I would say about that, though, is that we're still in process of making sure that that is actually happening regularly. A part of that process goes back to what I named around students who are suspended being referred to the coordination of services team. Students who are referred to coordination of services team, that means that they are being, they're receiving the kind of the wraparound support that we want to make sure that they have based in whatever it is that caused that suspension. So it could be that there's, it could be something as simple as they just were angry that day and they got into a fight. That happens, right? Or it could be that there's something deeper going on and we need to really pay attention to that. Mental health supports, et cetera. We, of course, don't want to wait until the suspension happens. And so we have a process for referring students well before that as well. In terms of restorative practices, that is a work in progress. We do have people who are trained in restorative practices, and I know that we have the attempt and the effort to use that, but as a district, that's something that we need to continue to roll out and train all of our staff to use. There is a plan next year, specifically with the student culture coordinators who are holding the Changemaker program to be trained in restorative practices and kind of start from the ground there. And then the second question, did I get to that? Maybe not. Yes, I did. I think I did. Second part of the question, the restorative practices. Yep.
I don't know if trustee Nunez would have this comment, but I have a comment about restorative practices training. I think it's just as important the way that we trained our partners in reading, literacy, and intervention. I think it's important for our partners also to be trained in restorative practices. Along with our teachers, along with our staff, like all staff, teachers, front desk staff, like anyone that's on campus, essentially. Just because I think it's so many of these things happen maybe not in the classroom setting, right? So it has to be beyond the classroom. And so I just want to make that comment as well. Like, I think that that's something for us to consider as we're really having a lot of partners and volunteers on our campuses, that they also understand our views and our Ravenswood promise for all of our kids, and even their own biases that they bring in too that can impact our kids that are on our campus.
Could not agree more.
You bring up a great point with saying that, especially considering we have a lot of local entities and partners that deal directly, that serve directly our students. Is it possible for us, starting next school year, for us to mandate a possible 2-hour training or something like that?
I think that's also something we need to do for our team in general. And so that's something we need to look into first, and then we can see how we can roll it out.
Yeah, I think that'll be a great action item, just so that people can't come back and be like, we didn't know, right? We want the standard to be set, and we want to ensure that our students are getting consistent treatment, whether it's from a full-time teacher or from a staff member on site to an after-school program, or anyone that comes to the school site should be trained to a certain level. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Any additional questions or comments?
I think that, sorry.
No.
me. I'm gonna, I hope you guys think of some questions, but one of the things I do want to say is I know last time when we did this in the middle of the year, we had very strong discussion about kindergarten data
Mhm.
and TK data. And so I do want to say that it is important that even when we felt like, oh, it's April, and April means we have half of April and May and 3 days in June or whatever, right? 5 days in June, to address this, not even June, because I think these data points were collected before June, right? So kind of.
Now they are.
So I do want to highlight and address, like, I thank you guys for hearing that from us and implementing things and even getting like tutoring help, right, from one of our partners in the specific classroom at one of the elementary schools, you know, and so seeing that jump go, like, and it's not that big of a jump, but it's a jump, right? Seeing it go from like this to this, and the end of the year is higher than the beginning of the year. To me, that means that the questions that we're asking up here is for the growth of our students, and the work that you all are doing is for the growth of our students. So I want to just thank you guys for receiving that feedback from us, and also doing something about it. And I also want to make sure that we continue, right? Like we said, it's not too late. Let's make it happen. And now it's like, okay, we have systems that we know work, right? If they're implemented with the system, with the training for each kid, if we implement them, we're seeing growth in the kids that they're being implemented for. And so we need to make sure that happens across the board, across the campuses. And I think that's really important for our community. And I also want to address, you know, like you guys talked about trusting teams as one of the goals, right? And recruiting and retaining. And, you know, we know there's a teacher shortage, and we know there has been inconsistent teachers in a lot of grade levels across a lot of schools. And so sometimes this data reflects the inconsistencies in being able to staff those classrooms. And so I know that this is a refining thing that we do every single year, right? Making sure that we're getting the right teachers in the right classrooms for our kids. And so I'm excited to hear that almost all of our teachers have been staffed for the next year for all grade levels at all schools, which is very, very exciting to have that done before August. And so I just want to say thank you to our principals, to our HR person, HR Joan, Joan O'Neill, our unicorn over there. I just want to say thank you for that. And also for our teachers to know that when you enter into this district, there is accountability. There's going to be coaching. There's going to be systems that we're putting in place to make sure that we're giving every single kid, no matter where they're coming from and when they come, right? And where they're coming from, that they get every single support that they need. So I know that that can only be done with the leadership that we have. So I just want to say thank you for that. And I'm glad that we're ticking up slow. And I hope, you know, that it gets faster every year. So we know you guys have done a lot of work, and I just want to acknowledge that too. But again, we know there's a lot more work to do. And I want to make sure that the celebrations of like the things that worked, right? Even if it was just for 10% of kids, that we try to figure out how to make sure they work for 100%. So those are my comments.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, unless you want to go. I was wondering, thank you for this presentation, everyone. I'm wondering if you could explain slide 15 or page 15, what the mastery test is.
I will let explain the mastery test.
I should have done a better job. Sorry about that. Thank you for the question. So our curriculum every 5 to 20 days, depends where kids start. They're giving basically a little quiz. Did you learn the things that were taught? So it's, did you learn these sounds? Can you read these words? Do you know these sight words automatically? And so in order to pass a mastery test, you need to master the content 80% or more, because what we know about reading is that it builds. If you don't really learn that the letter L says L, you can never read words that have that letter. So it's really important that they master it and aren't just exposed to it. So this slide helps us see that 79% is good. For year one, it's great. I'd love it to be 90 or more, but we'll get there. So that means that of all of the thousands of little quizzes that the many children in SIPs have taken, 79% of those were passed. They mastered the content.
And thank you for that explanation. And then there's kinder's not included here. Is that because,
Mhm.
why is that?
Great question. So this year, the kindergarten students didn't start SIPs before the middle of year data point. So when the graph was created, there was no MOI data to compare to, which I actually just realized that earlier today during ILT retreat. So that's my fault. But the kinder pass rate at end of year is 48%. There was no MOI tests. There was no mastery test given from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year. But from the middle of the year to the end of the year, 48% of them were passed in kindergarten. I apologize that that's not on that slide deck. I think it's in the appendix in a very tiny table.
Okay, and thank you for that. And
Mhm.
then, so then on the next slide, what is that information or how's it different from the previous? Right, so.
Great question. So just because a student passes a mastery test doesn't mean they made a certain amount of growth. So for example, if you as a student took one mastery test and you passed it, your pass rate would be 100%. It's great that you passed it, but that means you learned 2 weeks worth of learning, basically. What this slide tells us is how much growth did they make over time. So it depends where you start and what lesson you're at, but there's a certain number of tests that correlate to a certain amount of growth. And so we looked kid by kid at how much growth every single child made in order to determine this piece here.
Awesome. So then the kinder results here, which are from SIPs. I'm just thinking, where are these taken from? Is that from that second part of the year or?
Yep. So once kindergarteners started receiving SIPs, that's where this growth comes from. So to Trustee Bloom's point about that chunk of growth in a short amount of time, that there are 12% of kindergarteners who made a year's worth of growth when they started SIPs after the middle of the year. And so our plan is for all kindergarteners to start SIPs before winter break. Our goal is actually November 12th, I believe, for them to be able to start then.
I don't have a fully formed question about the 67% who are off track kindergarten, or the 22, where there's no growth. Just marking that there's a question there. I just don't have it fully thought out. I'll probably email, but just wondering about that. And then I know kindergarten was a specific point of communication, the last one of these conversations. And so just again, just thinking about the plan, the action plan, how do we go from 12 to 50 to 100?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just noting too, I think it's because they have the highest percentage, no growth or off track. So yeah, just pointing that out. I mean, I know we all see it, but you get me.
Thank you.
Sorry.
For this slide, can you tell me what school sites are highlighted in this data?
Yep, there's a very teeny note at the bottom. It's Bellhaven, Castano, and CCRMS.
And why isn't this Ronald McNair included in the data?
This year, Los Robles did not implement SIPs. We have a plan to implement next year.
Right. So is there a specific reason why it wasn't implemented this year?
You want to speak around language allocation and dual language context?
So while we know that SIPS is a high quality program, our students are predominantly learning in Spanish. And we have been trying to determine what the best program is for the Spanish components. And we, our if you want to come up and name, we were able this year to spend some time looking at our language allocation model and determining what this would look like in Spanish. We did have 68 students, I believe, receive SIPs this year at the school, and there is a plan next year that I actually will let Principal Quesada tell you about.
Yes. So number one, it's the language allocation model. So it's really determining which language support students need best. And so we focused on Spanish this year. The homeroom teachers took on the English intervention piece. And from that end, we also had staffing challenges. So we had one reading intervention teacher, and we had basically a vacancy in the upper grades the entire year. And so we didn't really have the capacity or the staff to support that intervention model this year, but we do for next year because now we have 2 reading intervention teachers plus a coach. So that'll set us up for SIPs in the upper grades, so grades 3, 4, 5.
Gotcha. So now I have 2 follow-up questions to that. Was it made known to the board that there were staffing shortages that hindered our ability to collect this data?
I missed part of the question. I'm sorry.
So was the board or was proper staff notified that there was a lack of staffing to ensure that potential tests? Yeah, were we aware of this staffing issue earlier in the year?
I wouldn't necessarily say that staffing was the reason why we couldn't implement SIPs, although I guess we have a disagreement there. I think that the intention this year was that 100% of the staff, no matter what, would do universal tier 2 time. I think the challenge with Los Robles has been the language allocation model and not really having clarity. There is a clear language allocation model, which I'm happy to present with Principal Quesada at a future board meeting. So we needed to get really clear, when is this happening, at what points? And now we have that. So we'll be able to implement. In terms of staffing challenges, we did have staffing challenges across the year in multiple grade levels at multiple schools. And so I don't necessarily want to say that that's the reason why things didn't get implemented. I think there are multiple reasons.
Yeah, because I think my thought process is this: as a district like Ravenswood City School District, with the amount of students that speak Spanish, I just don't understand why we would choose a program like SIPs, for example, without thinking first of the language aspect of it before we administered, because we lost out on an entire school site that predominantly speaks Spanish. And for me, I just feel like that's wrong. Because if we know that majority of our students here in the district are Latino, Latina, Latinx heritage, I just feel like language is so important that we should have thought of this before getting to this point right now. But considering we
I
are-
do, maybe this also indicates why we should have a study session.
Mhm.
But why are we able to implement SIPs at Los Robles next year with the same language being as Spanish?
I think because we have clarity of when we are doing our transition from L1 to L2, which was not clear across the school in every grade. And in our other schools, we teach predominantly in English, which is why we chose to move forward with SIPs this year. In terms of our understanding and knowledge of what is the best tier 2 program in Spanish, we did actually try a couple this year to see which one would be the best. So there was intervention happening. It's just that it wasn't through the same program as the rest of the district. But as I said before, there were 68 students who did receive SIPs at Los Robles and made progress.
Yeah.
Sorry, just do we have the data from the intervention models that were implemented at Los Robles?
We do, but not in a presentable fashion. There is data, but it's not, because there are different programs being used. It's kind of comparing apples to lettuce, let's say.
Okay.
But it is possible in the future, we will have data and we will be able to report very clearly on Los Robles's progress with the programs that we now will be implementing.
Yeah, I like the progress, absolutely. I just don't feel right that it says Belhaven, Castaño, and CCRMS, and we're missing an entire school site. Is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's fair.
I will have to say, today's training that we did for the last 2 days emphasizes how it's critical that we have alignment across all of our schools. And so that expectation has been set.
But then also looking at this data, this is our first year seeing this. I know it's gonna be a little bit different considering we'll have a fourth school site with the additional data next year. But then it'll also show us comparison data to this point, this time next year. So I'm looking forward to that. But I would also like to see the Los Robles Ronald McNair data.
Absolutely. And actually in the appendix, there is what we have of it from the students that received SIPs.
Through the chair, I also realized as we're talking about these grade levels, one of Trustee Nunez's comments and questions was if we could get beginning of the year and end of the year bars for each grade level side to side, that would be really nice for us to see, just because it'll help us see like where we started and where we ended. And I think we did that for middle of the year data. And then maybe it's in the appendix, but it would be nice to have that as well.
Yes. For what it makes sense to do that with, we did. There is a reason, and I think that she was wondering, I think specifically about this slide. Was it this slide? There was a different
She
slide.
said slide 16, but I don't know if
This slide 16. Yeah. Did you want to name?
I could be mistaken because I didn't have the conversation with Trustee Nunez, but my understanding was that she was requesting we have this same SIPS data, but in the format of the iReady growth data that's presented in the appendix on, I don't know what slide it is. It's probably in the 33 maybe. My understanding was that she was asking if we could present the SIPS data in that same format. And my understanding is no, because, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but SIPS doesn't have the percent progress to typical growth that iReady does, which is what those iReady slides are presenting. So we can definitely work and show this in a different way, especially if we're trying to look at the, a middle of the year and end of the year comparison. I think that's something we can do going forwards. But that specific metric is kind of an iReady unique metric, that percent progress to growth that SIPS does not have. But we can absolutely rework and show that beginning, middle, and end of the year comparison.
Through the chair, one more question. Thank you. I feel like I should already know this, but for some reason I'm not recalling it or don't know it. What percentage of kindergartners are coming from preschool or TK? You know?
That is a question I do not have the answer to off the top of my head, but absolutely can find it. Although maybe Solomon knows it. How many of our kindergartners are coming from TK?
I know the trustees have actually asked that before. We've added that as a tracking question to our enrollment system going forward, so we're able to see not just the number, but specifically which program students are coming from and how they're doing. So right now, I don't think that we asked that in a way that was particularly helpful. I think we actually looked into that. I don't know if there's a number I'm forgetting, but I feel like that wasn't particularly helpful in the past. So we changed our enrollment form to account for that in the future, which hopefully some of the trustees have actually seen. But we are working on better tracking that data.
Thank you.
It's a good question.
Yeah, and I think I'm just wondering because I'm not there and I don't know all the details of what's happening. Maybe you could provide a bit more color of what do you think is happening with kindergarten again for our last conversations too. I mean, I'm just thinking about all the things, but maybe there's something developmentally, like as it relates to the transition to school itself. But I guess I can't really go there again without thinking about that number. Is this someone's first time away from home? Like the culture is very different, all of that. Or is this something more related to something that's happening in the classrooms as it relates to pedagogy or teachers or the myriad things, but yeah. Do you have any nuance?
Yeah, well,
detail
I
you
would,
think? Yeah.
I would say from an anecdotal perspective, and I've had this conversation with multiple principals, noticing and in classroom walkthroughs, students who are like in the lesson, like really, really there, and engaged and moving forward, asking, was that a student that was in TK here? And 9 times out of 10, the answer was yes. So there is anecdotal information and data, but I think it's a great question, and I think it's something I would want to actually dig deeper into as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I know this is in the appendix, but I just do want to shout out Los Robles TK.
Yes.
Because it says, if my translation is correct, American, that their fluency in letters, right? Is that right? Yeah, okay. Beginning of the year was 35% and end of the year was 95%.
Yes, it was.
In letters.
Go,
in
Miss
TK,
Lucy.
So it's a good here. So I do want to say, like, just give a shout out that there is early literacy happening at our school site. And so I think that there's a lot that we can learn from that and just make sure that we continue to celebrate that. I mean, and I also just want to note, like, we know that street data is important, right? And what we're looking at right now is a mix of street and map data, I feel like.
Yeah.
And so getting that, anecdotal conversations, because I get that with my children at home and their friends whenever they come over. And I will say some of the answers that I got is like, oh, taking those tests are so hard. My brain just hurts. I just need a break, right? So some of those things, or I'm so scared, I'm so nervous because we have tests today. And as an anxious test taker my whole life, I will say that that is a real thing, right? So I also want to like make note of that sometimes these tests are not perfect. And so, but seeing numbers like this, where it's like, yes, there's literacy happening, we are being able to measure it. And maybe it's not in a test, but it is like a teacher knowing where her kid or his student is and what they need specifically. And so I'd love to have, like, maybe that's a longer study session conversation of being able to see that type of data and even dreaming up a way of how do we, I don't want to say standardize that, but standardize that in a sense so that that can become a new measure, right? Of growth, of understanding, of learning, because we understand that standardized testing is limited. And it shows us a picture, and anything from a tummy ache or a difficult morning can hinder performance. So I do want to say that. And then there's one other thing I think I wanted to say, but I don't know what it is. But thank you for this data. And I know that we have not had this data, this level of conversation but this is like the first year we're able to have this level of conversation in the beginning and the middle and the end. But and I know what my question is. I would also love to know how many students came middle of the year as like their first experience at school. And so that would be a number that I would love to also see, because I think that is important for us to know as well.
That we do have.
That's a fantastic question, especially considering what our enrollment throughout the school year has looked like. This year, we've seen just a large increase in students enrolling throughout the school year, which is huge and exciting. And that's exactly what we want to see. I have the answer to that specific question. I don't have it pulled up right now, but that is something we can get to you as well.
Wonderful. Thank you for this presentation. I'll also note that we will I'll be calling a special study session to dive deeper into some of these points, whether in August or September. And in that meeting, I would also like to invite all the principals who will be leading our school sites, just because I would like to have a little bit more insight on the leaders of each campus site, so that we can, as a board, hear more about some of the trends and stuff that they're seeing, as well as the potential needs for the school year, and ensuring that our principals feel supported, and that our staff are taking the necessary steps to ensure that we continue to dive deeper when it comes to this data. So thank you for this presentation.
Thank you.
I don't see any other additional questions or comments. If there are, we will send them over. But just to note again that we will have a study session when we come back from your very short summer break. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now, we will move on. I will give a second for all of our school site staff to, go home and enjoy the rest of your day. And we will move on to the LCAP public hearing. I'll note that we made a, typo adjustment. So the public hearing is 2024-2027. And I will turn it over.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I have a very short presentation before we will go into our public hearing. Just a reminder of what our LCAP actually is, our local control and accountability plan, which is a 3-year plan. And the purpose of the plan is to ensure that we are doing everything that we just mentioned in our previous vital signs presentation for our students, that we have it articulated and we have our funding aligned to it. What is exciting right now is that we have just spent the last year embarking on our Ravenswood Promise development of our learner profile. And what's exciting is that now.
Sorry, I did not follow protocol.
Oh.
So
The hearing, we're not doing the hearing yet. I have to do the presentation and then the hearing.
So actually, I'm supposed to open the hearing and then you do the presentation.
Oh, I am so sorry.
Then we hear comments from the
Got it.
public, comments from the board. So I move to open the public hearing for the, I move to open the LCAP public hearing.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. The hearing opens 4-0. You can continue. Thank you.
Sorry. I think that was my fault. Yeah, so just to go back, our LCAP, the creation of our LCAP this year is definitely cascading from the work that we've been doing around the Ravenswood Promise. It also cascades up, if that's a possibility. It comes from the bottom up and the top down through our school site plans as well. And I just mentioned that. And again, we've talked in the vital signs presentation about our district-wide teaching and learning goals, and the LCAP spells out the actions and the metrics that we plan to use to ensure that we are reaching those goals. And those are reported on our California dashboard. The California dashboard not only includes state assessments and other accountability measures that the state asks us to focus on, but also on our local accountability measures. So today we had our public hearing. Pretty soon we will also have our public hearing on our budget. And on June 27th, we'll talk more about our local indicators, and we will hope that the board considers approving our LCAP for the 24-27 school year. That is also a typo, I believe.
Wonderful. I will open the floor now for public comment. As I see none, I will open up the comment and questions from the board. As I see none, I will close the hearing for the LCAP. Thank you. Moving on to board reports and communication. Do we have any board reports?
I attended all the 5th grade and the 8th grade graduations last week. It was really fun. It was really fun to see all the parents and kids and friends, families, very excited for all of their children. And I also just want to give a shout out to every child that spoke at these things, whether it's just presenting in front of their families at Los Robles, which was, I guess, scary in and of itself, aunties and cousins and brothers and sisters listening to you. specifically, or if it was in front of the whole school in fifth grade and all the teachers and staff across the board. They just did so amazing. And I just am always impressed that even if there was a stumble, even if they felt like they couldn't continue, they felt the support of the leadership, the team, their friends, their students. It was just really nice to see. And I'll say the one thing that I loved at Castano was there was one kid, he clapped and yelled for every single student. And he was on the front row. And it was just so sweet to see like him get so excited. And even when kids showed up late and they had to enter the stage, he was just so excited that that student was joining the graduation. And I just think to myself, like, this is our community and this is a reflection of how much our community loves and supports their kids, and to see that reflected within their peers, I'm just really excited. And I'm so glad I get to be part of it. So that's one board report. Second one is, I know Anamatangi is hosting an informational session with City Year, who has been an amazing partner with us as well on our campuses. For any young person that is considering what's next and wants to learn more, they're having it on June 18th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on Zoom. So please check that out if you are interested in being part on campus with our kids, with an organization that is invested in really building and serving our community. So, thank you.
I have one board report. CRC, Climate Resilient Communities, is hosting a youth event this Saturday at Bloomhouse, 2555 Pocus Avenue. It's open to any youth who should attend. I believe it starts at 11. Don't quote me on that, but I will find the time and address it on my social. Aside from that, any other board reports? Yes.
Through the chair, I just want to share that last week I attended the CCRMS graduation. It was my first time attending a district graduation here since I've been on the board. So it was an awesome, new and first experience. I think the highlight for me was seeing the creative lays that specific students wore. That was super awesome. And they were just very proud. And so I loved it and glad to be a part of it.
Awesome.
Last thing that I remember, we're not going to be here this weekend, but Juneteenth is happening in the city of East Palo Alto, I believe at Bell Street Park this Saturday. So please come out. I think they're honoring some of the members of our community that really started the grassroots movement to make East Palo Alto in a city. So please come out, Bell Street Park. It's probably going to be a party all day. So show up when you show up and leave when you need to leave. But Bell Street Park, Saturday, June 15th.
When the city of East Palo Alto, sorry, the city of East Palo Alto is partnering with neighboring cities, police department to do a buyback for fireworks. I believe there's more information on the police website, but I thought I would share that information. As I see no other board reports, I will move on to item number 13. Which is the public hearing on the 2024-2025 Ravenswood City School District proposed budget. I will open the hearing.
I will be brief.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is the same story that we told in March of this year. So we worked pretty hard between December and March to finalize the budget with the goal of beginning hiring early. We are basically presenting, and you can see this in the presentation, the full presentation that we gave in March. We're not going to present today. We're just going to briefly recap kind of where we are and really how little has changed in the last, what is it now, 4 months, 3 months. We built up some big reserves over the last years in the pandemic. At the same time, we invested a lot more in kids. We are now past the point of building up reserves, and we are spending down those reserves. So this year, as planned, we planned on running a $2 to $3 million deficit. We expect to run about a $2 to $3 million deficit. Next year, we expect to run about a $1.5 million deficit. That's pretty good, especially given that we've lost 1.5 million of expiring stimulus funds. Right, so we got 1.5 million less in revenue next year, and now we're kind of done with stimulus funds. So going forward, presumably no more stimulus funds.
So we're kind of at our new revenue levels, and we're going to have to work to bring our expenditures over time into line with those revenue levels. But because we built up these reserves, we have time to do that. So running a deficit is real money. It's $1.5 million. There were a lot of headlines last week. City of Menlo Park's running an $800,000 deficit. Ours is bigger, but because we built up those reserves, we're not worried. We know we have time to close that. That was not the button. In any way, not depressed right there.
Well, that was the.
That more or less is the conclusion. I think there's a couple more things to talk about. Although I think I've hit on most of these now. So with that, I'll end the presentation noting that there's a very long appendix here that highlights all the work that we presented on March 14th. There have been a very few number of changes, but mainly not to personnel lines. So with that, I'll close my presentation.
Wonderful. I'll open the floor for public comment. As I see none, I will open the floor for comment from the board. As I see none, I will adjourn the hearing. Now we will move on to item number 14, which is another public hearing regarding the adoption of resolution number SY 24-29 to raise developer fees. I will officially open.
All right, last public hearing. From time to time, it makes sense to revisit our developer fees. So what is a developer fee? The district has the ability to require developers proceeding with new development to cover some of the costs that may have on the district. If, for example, a building was to have 400 new apartment units, that could result in dozens of new students. That results in real material facility costs for us. So what we do is we run a study. We partner with an organization to run that study who looks at, hey, what should the costs be of that development? The state raises that limit over time. But if we don't take action, our limit doesn't go up, right? What's interesting is the high school district can take action by themselves and they can actually claim all of that developer fee. So if the developer fee is $5, Sequoia can say, we're going to take $5 of that. Now we should get some of that money, but if we don't take action, whatever we don't raise goes to the high school district. So from time to time, we have somebody come in, they run a report, they check to make sure that we should and deserve to take more of those developer fees, or our fair share of those developer fees. We then notice folks, and going forward, development will result in additional money to the district at that level. I'm pleased to report we hired a consultant. They did the study. We're presenting the study. Should the board choose to accept that study and pass this resolution, we will raise our level 1 developer fees to the maximum amount allowed by statute, resulting in additional funds to the district whenever there is new residential, commercial, or storage container development within Ravenswood. With that, I will conclude my presentation.
I will open up the floor for public comment. As I see none, I will open up comment from the board. As I see none, I will adjourn the public hearing. Well, wait, just kidding. There's a resolution. I will entertain a motion to, oh, I see it right now. I will entertain a motion.
Through the chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve item, no? You have some? Okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve item 14A.
I'll second.
Resolution number 24-29, a resolution of the governing board of the Ravenswood City School District increasing school facilities fees as authorized by Government Code Section 65995B3.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries 4-0. We'll move on to item number 15, which is the disclosure from Ravenswood City School District regarding initial proposals. I will adjourn the public hearing for item 14. Just want to make sure it's like closed. I think we can fit a couple more public hearings, no? I will move on to item number 15, which is the disclosure from Ravenswood City School District regarding initial proposals with the Ravenswood Teachers Association and RTA.
Yes, so good evening, trustees. So tonight, I'm here to present to you our sunshine proposals and our notice to the public that the district intends to negotiate with our Ravenswood Teacher Association's partners or RTA partners with our reopening clauses, which are compensation and evaluations. So asking for your approval this evening.
Do we have any questions or comments from the board? As I see none, I will entertain a motion to adopt the initial proposals for RTA for the 24-25 school year contract reopeners.
I move to,
I'm sorry?
oh, through the chair, I just didn't see that it was noted, like consideration to approve the proposal, so I just wanted to note that.
It's through the
just-
chair, under the recommended motion, under the items A and B, that it does ask for the board to consider to adopt. I noticed that 15 does not have that, as it's just a summary, but items A and B do have under, I'm sorry, under item B, it does have the recommendation for adopting. the proposal.
So my motion was for 15B.
Are we on 15B or 15A?
15B.
So it just says proposal.
It says initial proposals to adopt the raising.
Yes, it does.
I thought we were on 15A when she came up and gave her statement. So I didn't know that we moved to 15B.
Oh, my bad. So we were moving from, okay, so 15, we will now move to 15B, which is the initial proposal to adopt, which she presented very briefly. You know, once it hits 9 o'clock, it just goes downhill for me. So I will entertain a motion for item 15B, which is the initial proposal to adopt the RCSD initial proposal to RTA for 24-25 school year contract reopeners.
Through the chair, the lovely, amazing, gracious, beautiful, brilliant chair. I would move to approve item 15B.
Do you want a second?
I will second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 4-0. We pulled item 16, so now we will move on to item 17, which is our superintendent report.
Yes, it's been a long night, but I do want to share that I mentioned briefly, our team, our instructional leadership teams across all our schools and members of our home office who will be supporting our instructional leadership teams. They included Austin Batson, Solomon Hill, Joy Shen, Gabriel Anguiano, myself, Sarah, and Karen. Participated in a 2-day retreat. And it was to ensure that these leaders across our schools are aligned, but more importantly, set the expectation of using data to stay focused and more importantly, create positive change that you are expecting us to, for us to have for our kids. I think more importantly, it's to ensure that there's positive change that we can scale up. So Trustee Blue mentioned if something is working well for some students, what is it that is working that we could potentially ensure that other students benefit from? And it also allows us as we use the data to ensure that we are not just wasting our time, but actually prioritizing what we should focus on. So it was very productive. I think it was an opportunity to build trust amongst the team. Still a lot of work to do around building those relationships as some of the teams were new to instructional leadership. But we set the tone and expectation about how we're all going to hold ourselves accountable to instructional excellence across our schools. So very excited about next steps. And we did this knowing that we're going to break for summer, but school leaders are already prepping for 24-25. And so when they hit the ground running in the fall, they'll be ready to sprint. And actually one of the teachers, we're really pleased that we were able to do this so soon. Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you. Superintendent Sudaria, I just want to say thank you for being an amazing superintendent for our district, and thank you to everyone in this room for a beautiful school year. I hope everyone does get a little bit of a break. But as you were talking, you were just reminding me of, the presentation we just had a few minutes ago with the vital signs and tests and all of that. And I just wanted to give you a suggestion, because I keep thinking about these kindergartners and my testing experience and all of that. And I think I've been public about, I'm a proponent of no testing. So whenever we want to have that conversation, I do not like standardized tests. I love understanding where my students are, my children are, but I hate standardized tests. But I was recalling my principal and remembering our Texas state tests. And it was a big deal every year because, they wanted to make sure we met those numbers. And particularly when we were younger, I remember we'd have huge rallies. I remember being so excited for those test days, again, like kindergarten, first, second, third. I remember because my principal would dress up as a celebrity every year. So I'm just giving you a suggestion. You're right. If we're gonna have the test, can we make it something exciting and fun and something to look forward to versus boring and drab and tedious? And so just me recognizing how awesome you are and your coolness factor, and just want to just drop this little suggestion. Maybe you want to dress up as Beyonce one day, right? When the tests are about to happen, or you're coming in as, whoever, Rihanna, I don't know, choose who you love. But I think you could pull it off. I think it could be amazing. We could make it a whole thing and just have a blast and
I
it
say
really
we
be a
break up.
testing party. Just something to think about. And maybe for the whole board and everybody in this room
Make
to
it
think
fun.
about. But yeah, but I really appreciate, I'm saying all this to say, I appreciate who you are and the work that you're doing with everyone on behalf of everyone here. Thank you. Thank you.
We'll move on to item number 19. The next regular board meeting will be held on June 27th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. Open session will be at 7:15 p.m. I will note I will not be present at this following meeting as I will be traveling next week. And I will adjourn the Ravenswood City School District Governing Board meeting of June 13th, 2024 at 9:12 p.m. Thank you.